Just curious of how you guys are doing because it's been a while since I last seen you. But if you've been keeping up with the episodes, hopefully you know that we are a safe space and that you continue to watch. Anyways, this episode is all about, the ones we've lost and also the parts of ourselves that we lost along the way during the grief process. And I want us to take this moment to actually sit with our own thoughts and share, what's happening in the comments below, whether you're listening on Spotify or watching on Spotify or watching on YouTube, because today is just all about just the parts that we lost of ourselves with this grief while also processing the grief. So I just want to open up by sharing a little bit of my own personal grief that I experienced over the course of my lifetime. One being like, my friend Jakari. For those who don't know, I had a best friend, in high school named Jakari. And he was one of those friends where I was just it was great to be around. It was enjoy like a joyful moment to just hang out with him every single time. And he got me into fitness, as I was in high school and a little bit in college because we went to Palm Beach State and we was doing community college together because we was under this scholarship called the Johnson Scholarship. For those who don't know, it's just a program where you were, first generation in your home to go to college, and they gave you a scholarship just to kind of move forward and continue that path, you know, and to continue your education. So me and him were cool, and we had math class together in our I think senior year, and he was just a cool guy to hang out with. Like granted, we didn't talk very often, in the beginning around like sophomore freshman year, but around that junior to senior year we became a lot closer, especially with the Johnson Scholarship Program, where we was able to interact with each other more than we should have. And he was a pretty cool dude, and we would just hang out, laugh, and just kind of like smile with the whole gang that knows about the Johnson Scholarship Program. And it was just a great time to experience, being around him. But unfortunately, as I was in Palm Beach State, he tragically passed away in a motorcycle accident. And I won't get into all the details of like what happened and how it happened and the other stuff in between, but it was just a tragic experience because not too long after that, we lost another classmate named Guy. I never personally interacted with him to the full extent, but I did grieve his loss as well because it was kind of like a back to back thing. But just to focus on Jakari, it was just one of those things that it was so baffling to me that I literally made a whole YouTube video about like our friendship. And if you're wondering like where that video is at, check out my YouTube channel, youtube.com/slash jaywalking, or it's jaywalking now because I changed the name from J Storm to it's jaywalking. If you funnel through the old vlogs and funnel through the old content, you will literally see um an old video of me just talking about our friendship and just talking about our history together. And I mentioned Guy in that video too, so I don't want to discredit or remove him from the topic. So they were two great souls and two honest, like honestly, like the most funniest people you'll ever meet. But I knew more of a Jakari than Guy, but still RIP to both of them. And I do miss Jakari to this day because part of his loss really impacted me because around that time, like I was like getting out or just out of like a toxic relationship. Now, when I say toxic relationship, it was toxic on that person's end, but also on my end as well, because we both played a part in this relationship or a former relationship we had. And I'm not gonna lie, like his passing was so like, hard for me because around that time, like I was just back in the fitness and I was just talking to him and I was just engaging with him as much as I could when it came to just college and managing friends and just managing classes. And literally like it was 1 week or two before he passed. I literally had a full blown conversation with him and talked about, the next time we meet, we're gonna like go work out together. And I never got that chance to do so because when I found out he passed, I went to his wake. I think that's what they call it. And I'm not gonna lie, I had a huge breakdown because seeing him in that state and not like a talkative live, moving around like, person I know him for, it was just hard to look at him and have my last memory of him just laying in a casket versus me talking to him, you know, one last time while he was moving, breathing, while we're just having a good old laugh. So I always try my best to like have that memory in my mind when I think of Jakari. Um, but it's something about just like visiting his wake and just kind of realizing like he's gone, leaving, I believe, a daughter behind. I'm not too sure because I haven't followed up with him or his family or other people that he know around for a very long time because I was going through my own process of dealing with his grief and his loss, and I wanted to respect their space and respect their privacy. But it's well known information that he did have a daughter, so that's the only thing I'll speak on about that. But yeah, he was just a cool person, and we hanged out around with similar people. I didn't realize like, he was into the things that I was interested in. Now, when it came to anime, I'm not too sure to the full extent that he was into that because I never even got the opportunity to like even ask or even check in with that because I was just so focused on, our friendship being based around the Johnson Scholarship Program and just, you know, the girls that we liked at that time and just other interests as far as like sports or other things that we were talking about at that time. But yeah, that was like a personal loss that I've experienced. And the grieving process was interesting because he was like one of the people, that I lost consecutively, because I lost not only him, but then around that time I lost my quote unquote sister because that's how I looked at her as my sister named Leanne. And for those who do know Leanne, like, you know, she was just, a character. She brought so many joyous memories and laughs that I can think about right now when it came to just being around her. I remember we even sang Michael Jackson Leave Me Alone song together. We always like hit the dance, the Michael Jackson dance, the moonwalks and everything like that. And it came to a point where, she came out to us, as being part of the LGBTQ LGBTQ plus community. Um, and I remember just not even judging her, like even just remotely asking her. I was just like, cool, dude, like you still, cool with me and you still gonna be my sister. Cause that's how I looked at her. And she also had like an actual sister named Tia. Shout out to Tia. It's been a while since I contacted you and reached out to you. But I need to do that. But yeah, Leanne was a cool person and she was just so fun to be around with. Now, the way she passed, I can't get into too many details about it because I don't know all of it myself, but I know it evolved into like something tragic where it was beef or something that was happening around that time between her and a couple other people, and then all of a sudden, she was just involved at the wrong place at the wrong time. That's the only way I can describe it. But her loss was so impactful for me because it was a couple days before all this stuff was happening, and she came by and visit, and she wanted to speak with mom, but I think mom wasn't around. And around that time, she had someone with her, and again, I don't know who this person is, but they was with them, and then I mentioned it to Ma, and then we ended off like having like a small disagreement and like an argument. Not necessarily an argument where it's like full blown like you yelling at each other, you guys talking to each other, but it was mainly like a slight disagreement where it left a little bit of a bad taste in your mouth, but you still love and respect that person. That's how it went for me and my perspective. And then couple days or maybe a week later, like I heard of her tragic passing, and it left me scarred because I left off on a bad note with the person and I didn't even get a chance to either talk to that person again or like say sorry or just mention like, hey, that's my fault when it came to like that disagreement, because I don't know what it was. It just hit to the point where like I didn't even get a chance to say anything. Like I didn't get a chance to make amends, if you will. And it definitely hurt, just to experience that, along with like my family members and like her family members. So if her family members are listening, like I just want to say like, I do miss her as well. And I'm sorry that I haven't reached out because I have my own pattern of like when things are happening around me or there are certain connections I feel like, that won't go away. I just tend to not reach out or even say anything to that person and have this expectation of like, oh, if I reach out to this person, it's just like picking back up where we left off, because that happened a couple of times with my other friends. So I expect that, or at least have that strategy and notion with every single relationship around me. I'm working on that and I need to switch that up. But yeah, those are the two things that I've like, you know, will say like that, what I experienced, that grief and loss. And to tie it in with like, anime, because Leanne, my sister, me and her both, was interested in anime. She wasn't as into it as I was, but just to kind of tie in, with my love and passion, because anime did help me with that grief and loss. I know in the previous episode I mentioned Jiraiya and his whole death, experience, helped me with grief. But I want to switch it up a bit and just talk about Attack on Titan, because Attack on Titan indirectly helped me deal with anger and grief, you know, being mixed in, because we know Aaron. If for those who haven't seen Attack on Titan, I highly encourage you to go watch it, because it's such a great anime. And it's not too long either, like 4 seasons and like what, roughly 15 to 25 episodes, like without the fillers or like just the runtime of the intro, like you will get through it pretty quickly. But I highly encourage watching Attack on Titan. But Aaron's character is such a great representation of like, unresolved trauma, but also they mention like, how his anger and grief of his whole experience can lead to the person that he is like at the end of the show. And what kind of helped me like kind of have this clicking moment is the moment in season 4, in the beginning of, that season, where they invaded Marlin, and Aaron n- figured out and knew like Sasha, a beloved character, was going to die, but he wanted to see if he could change that fate. And once he realized like she died in the middle of the battle, you can see on his face like the grief, the laughter, the anger, all wrapped in one. Like, but it came off as like, did you even care about her? Did you even, wanted her to live? Like, it kind of gave off that vibe. And you can see in his face that ultimately, like, whatever he tried to do, like, it was not going to change the balance or the faith of her, life wasn't changing. And that grieving process of him just like kind of breaking down in a laughter, it kind of resembled a little bit to me of like, that moment with Leanne and Jakari, where I wasn't laughing or anything, but it's just kind of like there was a sense of a breaking. And only thing I could have did was just make jokes to kind of process the grief and that uncontrollable like sadness and then rage of like, damn, these are actually losses that I experienced. One was a week or so after I just got done talking to this person, and the other one was just off of a disagreement and kind of left a bad taste in both of our mouths. And I didn't even get a chance to speak to these people again or have like a rectify like moment with them. And it's just, it led to like inner, anger towards myself. And I just kind of completely shut down and not tending to reach out to people. So maybe that's why I don't like reaching out to people as much, because I don't want to deal with the loss of, a person, that I know so well, when reality is death is inevitable, grief is inevitable. That's just a part of life. It's literally a part of like our nature to go through those experiences, because as we get older, we're going to lose people, whether physically lose them or like the relationship we have with them. We're definitely going to experience those griefs and losses. And regardless of what you think about or like make of it, it's going to happen. It's just something you have to deal with and accept. And for so long, like those two passings, I never fully accept, because a part of me, was angry at myself of how each one played out. But then also I didn't get a chance to like, talk to them one last time or have a good conversation. At least that's how I perceive it. But now looking back on it and just speaking out on this episode, you know, I believe they know that I would be okay. They know that, I have good intentions and continue to move forward. You know, with the ideas of them and just like the memories of them. And I believe for me right now, that's all that kind of matters for me now, is just holding on to their memories and remember the good times and remember the laughs and remember the ups and downs, because, life itself is all about creating memories, having them. And sometimes nowadays we capture them on our phones, and just keeping that in mind helps me with their grief and help me with their loss. And even I mentioned, a different type of loss in early episodes about, my passion for video games and streaming. I'm finding that love back again, but I already went through the process of like, okay, I don't play as much, I don't interact in the game as much, and this is like my main focus when it comes to creativity. And so far, I already grieved that process, and I'm loving every second of it, you know. And we just got to appreciate the losses as well, because you may never know when you leave this earth, and you may never know what will be like your coping skill that's now like just something that doesn't feel the same anymore. Just appreciate every single moment, whether it's with a person, a place, or just a thing that you use to kind of deal with, like, this thing called life. So one thing I'll just have to say, like, far as like, you know just grief and loss, is just like, let's hold a space for each other to deal with that and to process that grief, because not a lot of places where you can go when you have to deal with like a certain grief or a loss in your life, or just like other people dealing with their own loss and grief, and you become in that space. So I just want us to kind of create that space, because grief doesn't end, but we learn how to carry it. I'm gonna say that again. Grief doesn't end, but we learn to carry it. And sometimes we find meaning in just the most unexpected stories. And what I mean by that is, you may hear a story from either myself or someone else around you, and whether you realize or not, it definitely have an impact on you. And you can take away anything from a message, whether it's, a 30-second reel on Instagram, YouTube, or TikTok, or even a podcast like this, where you're just hearing, uh a character, not even a character, let me take that back. You're hearing someone expressing their own stories, one step at a time, and just hearing it, just maybe you learn something from it, maybe you get some new insight from it, and maybe you just, you know brush it to the side until something in your life comes up and you can automatically connect to that. And that's why I want to hold this space, because again, grief doesn't end, we just learn how to carry it. Okay. So before this episode ends, I also want to say we also have merch. I just want to put that out there. We definitely have merch. And let me push this back a little bit so you can see fully that we have our own merch. We got our own merch. Prices and stuff will be, you know, um to be determined, but I have a couple points where, you know I have to like solidify. But we definitely have merch. If you're interested, just let me know in the comments, and just also let me know in the DMs. um because I know my Instagram is different now. Is I believe it's underscore jaywalking. So I'll put that in the description in this episode. And it's been a while since I recorded an episode, because I like to record, a couple episodes ahead of time. So I'm just getting back in the swing of things. So I do apologize if you hear, a lot of pausing and just kind of like stuttering, or just like filler sounds. But we getting back into it, and we just gonna keep it rocking, keep it pushing, because for this podcast, I'll welcome all like people, whether you can do this well or you can not do this well. I welcome everyone, because we just got to take one step at a time, and there's always a beginning, and just a re-step into this process. So I appreciate you guys for listening to 10 episodes. I will invite a certain guest pretty soon, because I want to get more people involved in this, but please be on the lookout for that. I appreciate you all, and I appreciate you for listening and watching. Until next time, keep walking. Take care. Peace.